This is David from the Earth Medicine Academy here with my friend Jerzy. Jerzy, how you doing?
Bardzo dobrze, panie. Ty.
Is it good?
I'm doing very well, David. Thank you. Very,
Wow.
very well.
Jerzy does not seem like someone who would know a lot about Native American traditions, but ironically, he does. Um, so, Jerzy, you have a book out. What is the
Yes,
book
I
called?
do. It's Sacred Earth Walk, Wisdom of the Elders.
Awesome. I will insert a picture of that in this video. And
Okay, thank
we
you.
worked on that book for a little while, and it's since come out. Tell me about that process. What was that like for you to write that book?
Well, it actually wrote itself, to be honest. Through the years, I kept journals and so on and so forth, and did a little writing here and there. Um, And at one point, a close friend of mine who was also involved with some of the elders that I was with um, wrote me a letter with 20 questions, various things of like, is there an afterlife? What's the significance of this or that? And and so I answered them, but in sort of in a sort of an iconoclastic way, and I discovered that there's some interesting things, different ways to look at things, as opposed to just like, well, it's like the magic wand. And so I had this stuff, bunches of stuff scattered in different places on the computer. And at one point at a meeting, someone asked me to do an elder blessing at a Mankind Project meeting. And the blessing that I spoke was about the seven grandfather teachings, which is honesty, humility, courage, respect, generosity, wisdom, and love. And I just did a little quick thing and just said, this is how the elders have taught me to align myself so that I could have a good and happy and good life. And people came up to me afterwards and said, "What was that?" And I go, "Oh, it's just the seven grandfather teachings." And my friend came up and said, "You know what? You should write about that. People need to know about that." And so I said, "Well, okay, but there's part of me that's lazy by nature, and I've got other things to do, and I just didn't feel that it was that important, but it intrigued me." So I started digging around, and I found all this stuff, and I just kind of compiled it together and patched it here and there, and started making sense, and it started to speak to me. And then I reached out, and you were actually one of the principal people that I reached out to, and we sat, I think, for almost a year weekly, right? Something like that.
Something like that,
And
yeah.
it just started to appear pretty easily and coherently. And it was challenging because I was asked questions like, "Well, what do you really mean by that?" Because I would skim over things, and I was able to sort of delve more deeply. And um, and the book slowly appeared. And after you and I were done, then it went through a couple of other people who I know that were editors, and they edited the thing. And there's the book. The
Well,
book
that's
appeared.
fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
um you know well, I mean, the general thing is that I'm in control of such a small percentage of my life. And I believe that this is really the truth, of sort of a universal truth, that 99% of what happens to me is not because of anything that I've done, except showing up for whatever it is. And I've always found that when I've tried to take control and grab onto something and do something or accomplish something, that generally doesn't work out as well as. And I generally find that if I just step back and let it happen and just show up for whatever and just say yes, no, left, right, just make those little basic decisions, things really work out very, very well, you know?
Huh.
So that's how
How
this book came about. I mean, that's how I got the cover. I mean, it was just like ridiculous how easy some of these things were. And so there it sits. And I'm not doing anything to promote it necessarily, but I did accumulate a whole bunch of my stories, personal stories. And at some point, I'll go through the same process with it. I mean, it takes an awful long time, but yeah, who cares?
Yeah, yeah, it's like giving birth. So, how old were you when you started studying with elders, with Native American elders?
Oh, shoots.
Or I should say, let me back.
Well,
How
I would
old were you when you first
it,
became interested in Native American spirituality and thought?
stuff. Well, I mean, I was a Boy Scout. So as a kid, I've always had a great affinity for the woods. And I think it was Thomas Seton wrote a series of books that I read about a young boy in New England back in the day who ran away from home and lived in the woods and became friends with this native guy. And it was fascinating stories, and I loved it, and it was just like, yeah, and there just seemed to be a rightness about it. So, but I never really identified it as Native American. It just seemed right. So, but the big turn was about 25 years ago. I was what, 43. And when my friend invited me to go up to Canada, north of Ottawa, for this meeting that he heard of elders and chiefs and stuff, and I went, and it wasn't because of that they were native or that they were indigenous or that they were had this sort of special thing. It was like they were really nice people,
Uh,
and I liked hanging out with them. It wasn't like I wanted their wisdom or anything, because they just seemed eminently practical, and so that's what attracted me, and that's what kept bringing me back. I just liked hanging out with them, and they had a sense of urgency about their messages, regarding what's happening to the earth and so on. And it just resonated with me, and that's when it all started. Yeah.
how did you? How much time did you spend with your teachers?
Well, there was a period of time, about 10 or 15 years where I would spend if almost half of my time up in Canada as opposed to Massachusetts, because I still had to make a living and so on. But I would say a significant amount of time. It's hard
Yeah.
to evaluate, but it would. I was a part of the community. I was accepted, and basically adopted, and because I would spend winters up there. I would come up in the summers. I would help with my elders gatherings because he had gatherings every year. So I was a significant part of that, of the security and the elder protocol and so on, because we would have like 1,000 people from all over Canada there. And so, yeah, I would say significant, I'd say half my life was up there and the other half of my life was, working to support the important half of my life.
Right, right. Huh. Do you could you tell us about a time that was particularly challenging for you when you were up in Canada, or when you were involved in ceremony or with your teachers?
Oh yeah. I remember early on, it might have been the second or third time that I went up there. Um, I just felt so isolated. And these are people that have long memories, and so it was getting sort of confronted with the visceral reality of what happened to them and their immediate family, never mind their ancestors. These are the Algonquins up in Kiribanziti, which is the reserve. It's about 2 hours north of Ottawa, and that was their ancestral lands, and the stories that I heard were horrific and horrible, and but that gave me a real feeling of isolation. It was like I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be accepted, but I felt so isolated and alone. Even when I'm up there, I didn't know, what my place was or anything like that. And I just remember I was packing up and getting ready to go back to Massachusetts, and this elder came up, and God bless him. And we just started talking. And one of the things that I discovered was that 90% of the elders, at least the ones that I met, had gone through AA. And I had just, recently started my recovery in AA. And there's a language, there's a community, there's a whole thing. So it just was really comforting to be able to talk to him, and because I felt like he understood. And his advice to me, because I, confessed that I was feeling isolated and apart. He says, don't worry about it. He says, just service. Service is the key. And just be of service, and don't worry, and everything else will show up. And he was right. And so what I did for years afterwards was I just would go up and say, grandmother, can I get you a shawl or something because you look cold? Or grandfather, can I get you a cup of coffee? And that's what I did. I just hung out, and I was just like a dutiful son, basically. And that solved it. But that was because that was always, there was a part of me that never felt belonging to anywhere. I'm an immigrant kid. I was an immigrant kid. I didn't learn English until I was 6. And, so there's all this feeling of isolation that was in my life. And that's the solution that I found for myself is, be of service. Go get the cup of coffee, go get them a blanket. And, and that's how everything evolved. They appreciated it. They saw who I was, and, and trust and love came from all that.
That's fantastic. We have very similar kind of experiences. Me with my Hawaiian teachers, it was
Mm-hmm.
very much the same thing. I mean, basically, all I had
Yep.
to do was just show up, be of service, and keep my mouth shut, which was challenging for me, but I
Yeah.
managed to pull it off
Yeah.
sometimes.
Keep your
Um,
mouth shut. Yeah.
yeah.
They really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Help pull in. Keep your mouth shut, because that's what they want. They don't want to hear you babble.
Who were some of the elders you were closest to?
Well, William Commanda, I was basically his helper for years, and he had some chops. He, would speak at the UN. He would speak at the Canadian Parliament. He would travel to Europe. I mean, he was an old man when I met him. He was in his 80s, and he had played a significant role in the early First Nations establishment of some kind of entity. I forget exactly the name of it, but he's one of the prime chiefs of that. He was the chief of his community. But he was just a regular guy basically, and he and I just got along just terrifically. And I would spend winters with him up there. It's interesting, and he would be known as the Dalai Lama of Canada. He's passed now, because people started recognizing the significant part that he played in not only awareness of First Nations people's needs and rights, but also of what First Nations peoples could contribute, and could show the rest of us like what's going on in a good path forward. So but it was interesting. I remember, and so when the Dalai Lama would come to Canada, the Dalai Lama would always make a point of having a meeting with William. And so at one point I was there up in Maniwaki, and William said, can you go see the Dalai Lama? He's down in New York. So I said, sure, I'll go. And I have a message for him. I'd like to see him. I said, sure, I'll do that. And so off I went from northern Canada down to New York City, where the Dalai Lama was doing one of his events. And it was impossible. It was impossible to get within within a mile of the guy.
Right.
Try
Yeah.
as persuasive as I could be, and then and I just noticed that there was this, that so you can never connect with this guy, that everybody has this personal connection that they feel with the guy. But with William, people would just drive up his doorstep, knock on the door, and and he'd invite him in for a cup of coffee, maybe lunch. It's totally accessible to anybody at any time. And and that was William. That's the way he was. He never kept himself higher than anybody else. He never developed a structure around him that would isolate him from people. And I was a part of his family. His nephews and nieces would come over and we would watch. My favorite memories or one of my favorite memories is that we'd sit and watch cowboy and Indian movies. It was like such a gas, Cochise and all these white guys playing Indians, and it was just terrific when his nephews were there, and every time, a white guy would shoot a rifle, 3 Indians would die. That guy's kid's not that good of a shot. But every time an arrow hit one of the white guys, they'd like cheer. It was fun.
That is. They must have had fun with Jay Silverheels, right, and the Lone Ranger and stuff.
Oh yeah. So that was it was like nothing was serious. It wasn't like everything was like that. I mean, there were times when things were serious, of course. In ceremony and so on. You focus. It's not that you're serious. You just become aware of what you're doing. Is really what it is.
You're essentially
just like pay attention. Damn it.
Yeah.
Don't get distracted. If you're going to do a thing, do the thing, but don't make it like it's like the most important thing in the world, because it isn't. I remember once, I'm a pipe carrier, and there's a whole process that you go through. A pipe carrier?
Yeah.
There's lots of different kinds of pipes. The Lakota have their pipes. They call that a chanupa, and there's a particular way that they're handled and they're done. With the Algonquins, the Anishinaabe people, it's the Opwagan, and a pipe is just basically a vehicle for prayer. That's really all it is. It's just I remember once I was in a sweat lodge and somebody asked me, "Well, what's the significance of the pipe?" And I said, there isn't any. I said, what? I said, there's no significance. It's just a piece of stone and a piece of wood. Stick in a stone is all that it is. Oh, yeah? I said, yeah, but take a look at the stone. That stone is older than you are. It's millions of years old. And it was handled by this person who carved it in this particular way because, they were passionate about what they were doing. And the stick it was just a stick that was hanging off of a tree that somebody just hacked off and did something beautiful with. That's all it is. But the stone has got history, and the stick has got history. So yeah, just a stick in the stone. Well, there's a lot more below the surface than just what you think, and that's what you have to pay attention to. It's like there's a lot more going on than we think, but if we start putting our own projections on it, when I start projecting onto something and I'm the one that starts to make up stories about it, well, then it gets all goofed up and you miss the point. It's like a veil comes down and all you're doing is looking through a filter at something. So the whole idea of ceremony, the whole idea of paying attention is to lift the veil so that you can actually see the thing for what it is. So it's not just, pick up a pebble off the ground. It's not just a rock. Holy crap, that's been around for a long time. And how did it get made? How did it get here? How did it get into my hand? All that stuff is important, to keep in mind when you're, and not just go like, a piece of dirt and you throw it.
Right. So what is it?
Everything deserves
You're
respect.
a pipe carrier.
So a pipe carrier, sorry. So a pipe carrier, not everyone is a pipe carrier. Some people think it's an honorific, but it's a job, because when you're a pipe carrier, you place yourself in position in your community to help people, to be of service to people. And so you pray with the pipe for other people. There's lots of different kinds of ceremonies that you do with it. And it's like, as Lillian, my elder, would say, it's like a 911 to the creator, you know, and it's just one of these ways that you connect with all that is, you know, and the creator is not necessarily like, you know, a human being type of a person up in the clouds somewhere. The creator is, we don't know what the creator is. The creator is the great mystery, which is
It's a
what the
mystery, right?
Haudenosaunee people tell you.
Yeah.
It's a mystery. It's a, you know, it's a sueño. Sueño, which is Mohawk or Haudenosaunee for, you know, the creator, the mystery, great mystery. Anyway, so it's just a way to communicate and pay attention, I guess, you know, if you're following the theme of paying attention to what's going on around you, what's really going on around you. And what are the crickets doing? What are the bugs doing? What's the grass doing? You know, the stars, what are the stars doing? You know, what are they really, really doing? And, you know, it's fun to make up stories about these things, but it's really about paying attention. So a pipe carrier, sorry to get diverted here, is a person who's gone through and made a commitment and of this particular medicine. And you know, there's different ways of finding out if you are a pipe carrier. It's through, you know, fasting. It's through, you know, service, and it's also through the observation of elders. And so that's what you are. You have a special role in the community that can, you know, help people focus and pray.
That's
Does that
fantastic.
make any
Sounds like
sense?
Juliana, the idea of privilege and responsibility together, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's no real privilege, to tell you the truth. It's a job.
Okay.
When I was presented with the pipe that I have now, it was in with a whole group of people, and people, not native people, actually. It was in Massachusetts when my elders came down, and they're going like, "Oh, what a great honor!" You know, and this is, you know, blah blah blah. And I go like, "It ain't an honor, buddy. It's a job." And it's a commitment, you know. So if someone comes and offers you tobacco and says, you know, I need prayers for this or that, or can you help me with this or that, you do it because you're committed to doing it. You can't say, maybe next Tuesday because I got a headache right now. No, you do it. You have to do it. That's the commitment. So
It's funny. It's like it reminds me of that story you told me the other day about doing a dry fast or something, and then having to, and then Lillian came up and asked you to like,
oh that story. You want to tell that story?
sure.
Well, you know, I would fast every year up in Birch Island, which is near Manitoulin Island, and and it was a warrior fast. No food, no water, for 4 to 7 days. And so I was doing one of my 7 day fasts. It's out in the bush. You're isolated, and so on and so forth. And um, so I'm at the end of it, and Lillian comes up and says, "Oh, okay, good. You know, I need you in this ceremony." I didn't tell you about this part. So she pulled me out, and I went to this all-night ceremony called the Star Lodge. That's an ancient ceremony, and it lasts all night. And so I said, okay, and so we did that, and then she says, "Oh, and as the sun is slowly coming up, and it's like, oh, and I need a sweat lodge at 6 o'clock this morning because all my other helpers are sick." I'm
And
going,
this is
"Oh,
after you've
okay."
been fasting. You've been dry fasting for 7 days, right?
Yeah, yeah, dry fasting for 7 days, and you know, so I you know, ate something. I don't know. I must have eaten something, and so here I go, and you know, the wood needed to be split, and and people had been sleeping in the sweat lodge. So the sweat lodge had to be cleared out. You know, it was a lot of work. So we finally get the people in there, and they're coming out of their fast. That was the purpose of the sweat lodge. And I'm running the grandfathers in, and because it's not like some ceremonies where you have like 5 people running in the grandfathers, the stones. You know, it's a one-man job usually. Anyway, so and in the middle of all that, it was like, oh, I needed to like leave really quick, otherwise I was gonna poop my pants. And so I just leaned into the sweat lodge and said, "Lillian, you know, you're going to have to put this on hold for a couple of minutes. She's a big, imposing woman. You don't tell her things like that.
Right.
Go like, it's either that or it's going to smell like a barnyard in here. And
Wow. Wow.
so off I went, took care of my business, and she was like, okay, there you go.
Well, that's a
But
pipe
that's
dream,
what you do.
right? That's
That's what
great.
you do.
Awesome. I remember when we first met. Must have been about 10 years ago or something. Um,
More like 13 years ago, 12.
well, yeah, I remember when we first met. You
Yeah.
brought me tobacco. I was very touched by that. That was very kind
Mm.
because you were taking a
Hmm.
class I was giving. We're very similar, you and I, in that we're sort of well-educated white guys and stuff, and who sort of studied with native elders and
Hmm.
sort of done that very sort of challenging path. Do you have any thoughts about cultural appropriation and all that stuff? Because you and I, we've both been in situations where we've learned from our teachers, and we've learned from our teachers, and we both been I was told to teach. That was my
Yeah.
goal. That was what I do, and you probably have had the same experience. Any thoughts about that?
Hmm.
About the whole idea of cultural appropriation?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, first of all, and I'm sure you've had the similar experience. It's a responsibility that we have as people from outside of that culture, and we're trusted with things, trusted with certain knowledge and certain medicines and certain ceremonies and so on. And so it's a responsibility that you and I both carry. It's huge, and because it's not window dressing. It's not like you stick a feather in your hair and and then you can do things. It's not a weekend course.
Yeah,
It's not a certificate course by any means.
yeah,
And it's things need to be seen below the surface of what we're doing and how it is, and so cultural appropriation. I mean, there's two sides of it. There's the belt notching, right? There's, oh well, I'm a blah blah and I can do this and that, and it's like, so what? Right?
yeah.
I mean, there's William, and he was, he's a big hoop-de-doo, and he would get, people from all over the world come visit him and stuff. But within his community, he was Bill. He was just Bill, and he just go over, let's go, go over to Bill's for lunch or something. Nothing special, and because we're all special. So there's that piece, the belt notching, saying I've got this, I've got that, and but the one that really gets people's craw was when people make money at it, and and they would write books, and I was warned constantly, are you gonna write, what are you gonna do? And so it was really difficult actually for me to write this book, because it was like, I want, it was something that I felt compelled to share, point of view and my vision of what this is. But at the same time, I didn't want to be the expert on grandfather teachings, because I'm not. I
Right.
just know what I know. And William would constantly say, don't ever use my name. Use your own name is good enough. And in fact, he used to send me out to sort of police people who were, he felt were using his name inappropriately, going like, oh, I'm the representative William Commanda, all this stuff. And he would have me call them up instead of him. He'd like to sit right next to me. He'd like, call this guy up.
Tell them.
Tell him to stop. Call like, well, you've got his phone number, William. You call. No. And he'd be sitting there, and he'd be twiddling his thumbs, but he wouldn't say damn word. It's like, Jesus, William.
Yeah.
But but so there's that piece where people would make money and gain notoriety, but not give sufficient attribution to, where they got it and what this was. In other words, weren't giving it the depth that it deserved. So I always try to be very, very careful and cognizant of, like, if I say something, that I attribute to the elders, that it's not my thought, it's something that was given to me. But then I do have my own thoughts and my own visions and my own take on things. And so, and I make sure that that's very clearly separated. So that was the challenge of the book. Okay, because no, the 7 grandfather teachings are eminently practical, and they make sense. Um, but it had to be my voice. I couldn't appropriate them because it's disrespectful.
Yeah.
It's disrespectful to you might as well just reach into the wallet and pull out a $20 bill. It's stealing is basically what appropriation is.
Yeah.
It's stealing, and people don't really see it. It's difficult particularly in a culture that's used to being the person, the culture that does the conquesting. Just, and it's like the ones that walk in and say, "Hey, this is a nice place. Thanks a lot," and I'll take it. It's very difficult, when you come from those kinds of cultures, to kind of step back. But and you don't even know you're doing it. And it's like inadvertent racism. You're stealing and you don't know you're stealing, but yet it hurts the people that you're taking it from. It really hurts them because they've got something. They want you to have it. They want you to have it. They haven't gone through all this mess to just hide it. Some of the stuff that I learned and heard and was told about was kept secret for millennia, because it was such an important central part of their culture. They were afraid to share it. But William made a point. There were ceremonies that never saw white people in them ever, and he said, and he would be invited because he was the chief elder, and he said, "I'm not going if there's no Europeans there. If you're excluding people, I'm not going." And
yeah,
it was, and I mean, there was, and he did that with me too. There was a ceremony, a huge whoop-de-doo ceremony up in Birch Island on a place called Spirit Rock, not Spirit Rock, and it was, there's people from South America and Europe and Africa all going there, and I had been a part of setting that thing up with my elders from the Maya lands and with Lillian. But because I was a white man, the chief person who's setting this thing up said, "Well, if you show up, you're going to have to pay like $500." And I'm like, "What?" Well, why? Well, because you're white. Seriously, that's what they said. I said, "Well, let me think about it." And I went up to William, and it was that weekend, and he'd been asked to come up too, and so I said, "William, did they ask you to pay money to go to this thing?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, they asked me for like $500. He said, "They did?" I said, "If you pay $500, then I have to pay $500. I don't have $500, so I'm not going." And you shouldn't go either.
Wow.
That's the way it is, So money is a huge, when you look at it, the whole money thing is a real bugaboo. And that's a serious appropriation.
Yeah. It's interesting because it sounds like William was similar to Papa Ka'alakea and Uncle Harry Mitchell. They broke the kapu when they shared the medicine with people outside of the family. Never mind the outside of the race, just outside of the
Right.
kapu. And they were real
Mm-hmm.
iconoclasts. But fortunately, they were so high status that they could pull it off. You know.
Yep. Yeah, that's
I
true.
don't know if
That's
you
true.
found this, but I know with my Hawaiian teachers, there was a lot of the young people were not interested in learning. A lot of the young Hawaiians were not interested. It's different now, but at the time, 30 years ago, they just weren't that into it. Did you find that when you
Mhm.
were studying with your teachers?
Yeah, and one of the other elders that I worked with, Frank DeConti, I was always his helper, helping him with his lodges and different things like that. And he was, Algonquin Anishinaabe really, really invested in his culture and history. And it was interesting because when he and I were alone, he was fine. It was we were like brothers, and we got along just terrifically. But if a young man showed up, a young Native man, a young First Nations man would show up, the tone was completely different, and I was the white guy, and I was discounted because of my race and so on, and it would hurt me at first that he would do that because I felt that we were friends,
Yeah.
but I realized that what the concern was that by him making it too well known that he's got this white guy, this Polish guy who as a helper who's helping him run lodges and stuff, that would alienate any young First Nations person from wanting to come and learn the stuff because they just say, this just, that's garbage because, they got white people in there.
Right.
And so that's a huge, huge concern. And it is true that, the generation coming up, they're not as interested. And I can understand that, I remember seeing this Cree elder one time in a circle crying because he's saying, we're losing our language. And if we lose our language, we lose our culture. And
Yeah.
he was very upset about this. And, and you'll see in the more progressive communities up there, I'm talking about First Nations communities, you'll see immersion schools, and they're really trying to focus on teaching the young people and the kids the language and the Anishinaabeg. And but it's a losing battle in a way for two reasons. One, you don't make money speaking Anishinaabeg, the Algonquin language. You can't go to an office in Ottawa and program in Algonquin.
Right.
It's English or it's French out there. And here in the United States, it's English. And if you don't know English, you're at an automatic economic disadvantage. Automatic. So so it's not practical in that sense for the young people to focus their a lot of energy on learning any more than they could just talk with their grandmothers about.
Right. And they're trying to get their
Um,
careers started and stuff and get their life going and
yeah.
have a family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a lot of consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's another thing which people don't really know very much about. I mean, the true thing. Remember the whole thing of the Mayan calendar in 2012, and December 21st, and so on. Well, the Mayan elders that I know and knew, they were the ones that were really at the forefront of this when this quote unquote discovery came out and the information was coming out about the ending of that particular calendar. And even though it was portrayed as, oh, it's the end of the world, it's the end of this, end of that, what they said, look, it's an end of an epoch. And that at that time, things are going to start changing. And that the medicines that were used and the ceremonies are all going to start to fade away and be replaced by something else. Because, that's the ending. And I'm finding that more and more true as I'm going on. Here we are, 11 years later? Oh, no, I'm sorry, 9 years later. And it's significant, the differences. I know in my life, where I would constantly be doing ceremony, I'm hardly doing any ceremonies now at all. Because part of my medicine, my teaching is that I don't do ceremonies just because. I do it when people give me tobacco and offering, and there's a need for it, and so no one's been coming to me. No one has been showing up saying, I need help with this or I need help with that.
Well,
Whereas before that was pretty constant. People were constantly coming up, and there are different things that I could help them with ceremonially. But it's been like nothing. I mean, zero. And so that seems to be fading away, but that doesn't mean that it's not important to pay attention to what's going on. We just have to, we're not, I had a small little pipe one time, and it was sort of my personal pipe. That was my first pipe. And after a fast, I had gotten the message I need to let go of that pipe. And so I talked with Lillian about it, my elder, and she said, yeah. And, she had the same vision. And so I gave away the pipe. But I had been doing ceremony with that pipe for like 2 or 3 years every night. And so I felt the difference, and it was disturbing to me. And she says, no. I said, am I going to get another pipe? She said, I don't know. She said, but don't worry about it. Right. And I said, well, how do I pray? How do I do this thing that I've been doing for years? And she said, you're the pipe. You're the pipe. You don't need these things. You're the pipe. And so what I've taken that to mean for me is that it's not the things that we hold and we shake and rattle and all that sort of stuff, which is all fine and good. It's terrific, and it has import, and there's reasons for it, and it makes sense. But that's not the thing. It's not the thing. It's what's, I guess, what's inside of us. It's what's inside of us and what we see and how we react and how we look at things. They say that human beings have forgotten their original instructions and their original teachings. And so that's why we're in such trouble. And that we've actually forgotten them to the extent that we can only sort of remember some of them. And one of them, the most significant for me, is that I'm no more important than that mountain out there or that giant tree. I mean, I'm no less important than that giant tree and that mountain. And I'm no more important than that blade of grass that I'm standing on. We all have a point. We're all in this together. We all have significance. So that's one. And then the second thing is that everything is alive. Everything has life. Whether it's this plastic computer thingy-majigger or whether it's, the bird that's singing outside my window, everything has life. Everything has energy to it. And, and I would invite people to take a look and just say, okay, just take your little electron microscope of your brain and take a look at the desk that you're sitting at and just kind of really delve in and see what's really there. What is there, And what's there is an awful lot of space. There's not much there. It's just a bunch of stuff whizzing around that you can't poke your finger through because it's just like, you're like a fan blade, you don't see it, but try to stick your finger in a fan blade. Yeah. It's going to hurt. So you can't get through it. So it's the same thing. So, look at these things. And when I start seeing that, I start seeing the life in everything, because, what is life? It's not just, carbon-based breathing machines. There's more to that. There's, just because we don't see a rock taking, breathing, that doesn't mean that it's not alive. It's just not alive in the same way that I'm alive. So, so that's really, I think that's the part that is going to be coming to the forefront. I think, I don't know anything, but, and these things, these pipes, these ceremonies, these languages, it's all disappearing. Before airplanes and before, internet and all that, we were all very separate. I would be in a little Polish village somewhere, and you'd be in some Scottish something or other, and we would never meet. We would never exchange. I wouldn't even know where the hell Hawaii was. You wouldn't even know where Canada was, But now everything is blended and blended and blended. And we're seeing this, as far as, the Hapas here in Hawaii, people who are part Hawaiian, part Filipino, part, European, and things are getting more blended. And so this stuff is fading away, it's all fading away.
identity too. Because if we don't, if culture defines us, not only what we do, but who we are, and when
Yeah,
things start dissolving, there's almost a archaic retrograde kind of thing of trying to find our
yeah,
tribe. Our tribe
yeah.
is blended. We're all mongrels.
Yeah, well, and of course the old ways are completely irrelevant to the younger people.
Right.
It's irrelevant, in major ways. So it's like,
But like I
you
mentioned
know,
in the introduction to your book, I wrote the introduction to your book, and I said that there's still things we need to carry forward. There's things that when
yeah,
where the baby is being thrown out with the bathwater.
exactly. And that's our purpose. That's your purpose. That's my purpose right now is to like make sure the baby doesn't get thrown out with the bathwater. But let's change the damn bathwater, okay? Because it's cold and stinky.
Right, man. That is great. Well, on that note, on the stinky bathwater note, how can people get
Right.
in touch with you, and how can they buy your book?
How can they buy my book? Well, it's on Amazon.
Okay,
It's
called Stinky
just
Bathwater.
that's the main way. Or you can come over here, and I'll
Okay,
give you one.
okay. And you
I
have a
don't care.
website or an email address they can contact you at?
Just give them my personal email address. Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
It's jmkokurewicz at gmail.com.
All right,
And
yeah,
they can, anyone that's, huh?
alphabet
It'll
soup.
probably melt, if it melts down my email, it melts down my. Well, it's better than getting ads for Viagra and shit. So
That's true. Viagra. That's right.
the stuff that
All right, man.
I don't know. Well,
Great.
how
I
much
will.
how much Viagra
I'll
can you
put your
take? I mean,
information
really.
in the trailer here. Thank you so much. This has been great. I really appreciate
Yeah.
everything you bring to the world. So thank you.
All right, Dave. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. I feel very honored that you'd ask me.